stop scrolling, because what you're about to hear isn't just another royal rumor, it's a slow-burning unraveling that insiders swear has been years in the making. And now, it's exploding all at once around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry in a way that feels less like coincidence and more like consequences catching up. Let's get one thing straight immediately. Behind the polished smiles, the curated interviews, the soft-lit documentaries, there's a completely different energy being whispered about. Not calm, not composed, not the effortless control everyone sees on camera. According to people who claim to have witnessed it firsthand, when Meghan is challenged, it doesn't stay quiet. It doesn't stay graceful. It escalates. Voices rise, emotions spill, and suddenly the room knows this isn't the image you've been sold. And that right there, that sets the tone for everything that follows. Because once that illusion cracks, you start questioning everything else. Now layer that with the tension that people keep circling back to, the marriage. Nobody is officially confirming anything, but the whispers, they're getting louder. This isn't about small disagreements or the kind of bumps every couple hits. This feels heavier, like pressure building over time, like something underneath the surface that hasn't been resolved, only managed. And what makes it even more unsettling is that insiders are claiming this wasn't unexpected. Long before the wedding, before the dress, before the fairy tale was broadcast to the world, there were concerns. There was someone deep inside the royal circle who reportedly spent time with Meghan repeatedly at Kensington Palace. Not casually, not socially. These were serious sit-downs, explanations about royal life, the structure, the expectations, the rules that don't bend. And after just a few of these conversations, that same insider allegedly came to a quiet but chilling conclusion: this wasn't going to work. Not in a small way, in a fundamental way, like oil and water. And yet, the wedding happened anyway. The world watched. The narrative was sealed. But now, looking back, people are starting to wonder, did they already know this would unravel? Because fast forward to now, and suddenly everything feels like it's collapsing at the same time. A book drops before people even get their hands on it, it shoots to #1. That alone raises eyebrows. But what really fuels the fire? The reaction. Meghan and Harry don't just dismiss it, they come out swinging. Strong words, sharp denials. And instead of shutting the story down, it does the opposite. It pulls people in. Because here's the thing, when someone reacts that intensely, people don't step back. They lean closer. They start asking, what exactly are you trying so hard to shut down? And just like that, curiosity turns into demand. Demand turns into sales. And suddenly, without realizing it, they've amplified the very narrative they were trying to bury. It's almost strategic, but not in the way they intended. It's like watching a domino effect they can't stop. Now let's talk about the image, because this is where things get almost theatrical. The homemade jam moment, the soft aesthetic. Meghan in a garden, picking strawberries, presenting this perfectly curated domestic life. It looked effortless, natural, authentic. But then people started digging. And what they found? It wasn't homemade. It wasn't even local in the way it was implied. It was produced, packaged, and presented with a story attached. A story that didn't quite match reality. And once that detail slipped, it triggered something bigger. Because suddenly it wasn't just about jam. It was about trust, about authenticity, about whether the image being sold is real or carefully constructed. And here's the brutal truth. Her brand depends on people believing her. Not just liking her, but feeling connected enough to buy into what she's offering. And when that connection weakens, everything tied to it starts to shake. That's exactly what people are saying is happening now. The deals that once looked unstoppable, they're slowing. The momentum that once felt unstoppable, it's fading. Take the Netflix situation. When that deal first dropped, it was massive. Headlines everywhere. Huge numbers. The beginning of what was supposed to be their independent empire. But the content? It didn't land the way it needed to. It got attention, yes, but attention fades. Impact lasts. And this didn't stick. And now, right when this book controversy explodes, there are signs Netflix is quietly stepping back. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for people to notice. And the timing? It's too perfect to ignore. It feels like everything is catching up at once. Then comes the part nobody likes to talk about, but everyone is thinking about: the money. Because on paper, it looks like they should be fine. Harry has inheritance from Princess Diana and the Queen Mother. He had the massive payout from his own book. Add the streaming deals, the appearances, it all adds up. But here's what people forget. Life lifestyle matters. And their lifestyle, it's not just wealthy. It's expensive on a level most people can't even comprehend. Security alone costs millions every year. Then there's the house, the staff, the travel, the maintenance of an image that requires constant visibility. And when you're spending like that, past earnings aren't enough. You need steady income, continuous deals, constant relevance. And according to what's being said, that flow isn't as strong anymore. The opportunities aren't coming in the same way. The hype isn't what it used to be. And suddenly, they're in a position where the lifestyle hasn't changed, but the income supporting it might be. And that's where things get dangerous. Because financial pressure, that's not just a background issue. It seeps into everything. It amplifies tension. It turns small disagreements into bigger ones. It adds stress where there's already uncertainty. And when people talk about cracks in the relationship, they're not just talking about emotions, they're talking about this too. But here's the twist that complicates everything. Despite all of it, there are still claims that Harry is deeply, genuinely invested in Meghan. Not out of obligation, not out of convenience, but emotionally, fully. And when you look at his past, it makes sense. The struggles, the instability, the search for someone who understands him. And then she comes in, listening, validating, supporting. That kind of connection, it's powerful. It can override doubts, it can silence red flags, but at the same time, there's another narrative building, one that paints a very different picture. That maybe, just maybe, Meghan saw more than love. That she saw access, opportunity, a global platform that couldn't be reached any other way. And when people start looking at her past through that lens, patterns begin to emerge. Relationships that end once they've served their purpose. Friendships that fade when they're no longer aligned. A father relationship that's completely fractured. A first marriage that ended just as her career began to rise. Individually, these could be coincidences, but together, they start to look like strategy, like careful decisions about who stays and who goes. And right in the middle of all this is Harry, caught between worlds, because going back, that door doesn't seem open anymore, especially with Prince William. From what's being said, William isn't reacting emotionally. He's not shouting. He's not escalating. He's doing something much more final. He's stepping back completely, because in his view, every attempt at reconciliation turns into something else. Interviews, content, deals, and he's not willing to repeat that cycle again. So now Harry is stuck in this in-between space, not fully part of the royal world anymore, but not fully thriving outside of it either. And that space, it's uncomfortable, it's unstable, and it's getting harder to ignore. And this is exactly where everything starts to feel trapped. And just when you think the situation couldn't tighten any further, it does, because that in-between space Prince Harry is living in, it's not just uncomfortable, it's suffocating. Think about it. Going back to the royal fold isn't a realistic option anymore. Not publicly, not cleanly, not without consequences. And staying where he is now, that world isn't unfolding the way it was promised. It was supposed to be freedom, power, independence, but instead, it's starting to look like isolation wrapped in pressure. And then comes the comparison that shook everything. The moment people realized just how quickly royal status can shift. When Prince Andrew had his title stripped, it didn't drag on for years. It didn't involve endless debates. It happened swiftly, quietly, efficiently. And insiders say that moment hit Harry harder than anyone expected, because suddenly the idea that something was too complicated to happen, gone. If it could happen once, it could happen again. Now imagine that reality sitting in the back of his mind while looking at the future, especially a future where Prince William becomes king. And from what's being whispered, William isn't hesitating. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Because in his eyes, what's happening right now isn't just family drama, it's something much bigger. It's a parallel version of the royal brand operating from California, stepping in and out of the connection whenever it's beneficial and stepping away when it's not. And William, he's not playing that game anymore. He's watching, quietly, carefully. And the more this situation evolves, the more it becomes clear he's not interested in repairing something that keeps repeating the same pattern. Because from his perspective, every olive branch turns into content. Every private moment risks becoming public currency. And once trust reaches that point, rebuilding it isn't just difficult, it's almost impossible. Then there's King Charles III. And his position? It's probably the most complicated of all, because he's not just a monarch, he's a father. On one side, there's Harry, his son, someone he clearly still cares about. On the other side, there's the crown, the institution, the future. And right next to that future is William, who isn't willing to compromise in the way Charles might emotionally want to. So Charles is stuck, pulled in two directions, wanting to fix things, but knowing that any move he makes could make everything worse. Too soft, and it risks damaging the institution. too firm and it risks losing his son completely. And in that tension, nothing gets resolved. It just lingers. And then comes Camilla, whose perspective cuts through everything with a kind of bluntness that people inside that circle can't ignore. Because from what's being said, she didn't just observe Harry's situation, she watched him change. Not gradually, not subtly, but in a way that was impossible to miss. From someone easygoing, widely liked, grounded, into someone constantly frustrated, constantly unhappy, constantly speaking out. And in her view, that shift didn't happen in isolation. She believes Meghan played a significant role, not necessarily creating the frustration, but amplifying it, feeding into it, encouraging it rather than calming it. Now, whether that's fair or not is a completely different conversation, but the fact that this belief exists within the inner circle, that matters, because perception inside that world carries weight. And then there's the pattern, the one people keep coming back to over and over again when it comes to Meghan Markle. Not one isolated moment, not one controversial decision, but a series of connections that seem to follow a similar trajectory. Relationships that fade, friendships that disappear, people who were once close suddenly not present anymore. Her first marriage is always part of that conversation, how quickly it ended once her career began gaining momentum. Her father, by most accounts someone who played a major role in her upbringing, completely cut off, with no reconciliation even during major life events. Longtime friends who weren't part of her wedding, while high-profile celebrities she barely knew were front and center. It creates an image, not necessarily confirmed, not proven beyond doubt, but consistent enough that people keep noticing it, because the more pressure builds, the harder it becomes to maintain a perfectly aligned narrative. Small inconsistencies become bigger questions, small criticisms become louder doubts, and suddenly everything that once looked seamless starts to show its seams. And this is why the current moment doesn't feel like a sudden collapse. It feels like a buildup, like something that's been forming quietly for years. Decision after decision, move after move, each one stacking on top of the last. And now it's all surfacing at the same time. The book hitting #1 before release, the reactions that fueled curiosity instead of shutting it down, the deals that no longer carry the same momentum, the financial reality that's harder to ignore, the family divide that seems more permanent than ever. It's not one issue, it's all of them colliding. And what makes it even more intense is the timing, because when everything happens at once, it doesn't give space to recover. It doesn't allow for quiet adjustments. It forces everything into the spotlight at the exact same moment. And right now, that spotlight is brighter than ever, because the biggest question isn't just what's happening now, it's what happens next. Does the pressure keep building until something finally breaks? Or do they find a way to regain control of a narrative that's slipping through their hands piece by piece? Because one thing is certain, this isn't over, not even close.